We begin today on Daf Kuf Yud Ches Samad Beis, the Mishnah in the middle of the Amud. Sagt the Heilige Mishnah, Ein loichin min harayim. You're not allowed to buy from shepherds tzemer, wool, or v'cholov, milk, or gedayim, goats, because the concern here is that these shepherds may have stolen these items from the owner that they're working for. So you're not allowed to buy from a Ganev, because when you buy from a Ganev, you're supporting his industry of Gneva. You're also not allowed to buy from a watchman for fruits, eitzim, wood that he may have stolen from the property, or uperis, or fruits. Aval, however, loichin min hanoshim, you can buy from women, kli tzemer, woolen garments, Yehuda, if it's in the section of Yehuda in Eretz Yisrael, or kli pishtan, or flax garments, begolul, if it's in the Golul section of Eretz Yisrael, and also va'agolim, or calves, b'shorin, in the shorin section of Eretz Yisrael. The reason is because it was customary for the women to be selling these items in those areas in Eretz Yisrael, and their husbands are definitely aware of what they're taking from his possession to sell, and we can't suspect that these women, these wives, are stealing from their husbands. So therefore, you can buy from them. But kulam, anyone that sells you anything, sha'amru, that say to you, lahatmin, that hide what I'm selling you, don't show it to anyone. Asr, you're not allowed to buy from him. So in that, definitely there's a concern that what he's selling you is stolen goods. V'loichim, beitzim, v'tarnegoylin, m'kol makim. You're allowed to buy eggs or chickens from anybody in any place, because for this, there's no concern that it was stolen. This is something which is always more commonly available, and it's something that you don't have to be afraid that it was stolen. Tana Rabbana, we learned in the Braisa, ein loichem min harayim. You can't buy from a shepherd, loy izim, not goats, v'loy gdoyim, not kids goats, v'loy gizin, and not pieces of wool, v'loy tlushin shel tzemer, and not torn off pieces of wool. All of these were concerned that the person that's selling it is working as a shepherd, and he's may have stolen it from his master. You are allowed to buy from them tfurin, if they have sewed garments. Because even if they stole it, but now that they made a garment out of it, so they acquire what they stole, as we learned earlier in the Masechta with the Shinu, that they changed it from what it was originally. So they have to pay back money for the gzela, but the item itself now is theirs. So you can buy this. You can buy from them milk or cheese that was out in a midbar or in any unsettled area, far from where their owner is, because something that's out far in the midbar, the owner of these animals, which the milk is produced from, is not interested in taking this back home such a far distance, and he just leaves it there. So it's not stolen goods. V'loy b'yishu, but not from the milk or cheese that's in a settled area near the home of their owner, and he wants to bring it home. And they may have stolen this. V'loy chemehen dald v'heit sign, you're allowed to buy from a shepherd if he's selling you animals and it's 4 or 5 sheep, or dalad v'hei gizin, or 4 or 5 pieces of wool. This is something that you're not concerned that was stolen from the owner and the owner was not aware of this. It's enough of an amount that even if it was taken from the owner is aware of this and he knows about it, and it was already settled with the owner. Avaloi shtei tzayin v'loi shtei gizin, but not 2 sheep or 2 pieces of wool. That's something the owner may have not noticed and they may have stolen it. Rabbi Yehuda says, Baisais loikchem mehen. If they're selling animals, domesticated animals that are brought into the home, that's something you're allowed to buy from them, because if it goes missing, the owner is aware about this, and therefore there's no concern it was stolen. However, the animals that are out in the field, out further away, and now the shepherd is selling this, the owner may have not realized that he took it, so it's stolen goods. The rule here is as follows. Anything that you see a shepherd is selling, or balabais margish by, this is something that the owner definitely it caught his attention. He realizes that the shepherd has this and is selling it. Like chemen, this is something there's no concern that it was stolen and you can buy from them. A margish by, but if it's something that the owner did not necessarily realize and he sneaks away one animal from a big flock of sheep, or some wool from a lot of wool, then ain't like chemen. This is something you're not allowed to buy from them. It could be stolen goods. So the Gemara is going to explain us some details in this Braisa. The master said here in this Braisa, loichin mehen dalad v'heit tzayin. You could buy from them if they're selling 4 or 5 sheep. Question is, and then it also says dalad v'hei gizim, 4 or 5 pieces of wool. Why does it say 4 or 5? Hashti yeshleimar bozav ninon. If it says that you can sell even 4, a lesser amount, and even that the owner will notice, and therefore it's not stolen goods. Chamisha miboye. Does it have to say that if it's 5, For sure the owner will notice this, and for sure you can buy it from them. Why does it say 5 as well? Amar Rav Chistis, the one pshat Rav Chistis said, Arba mitoy chamisha. What it means is, if the whole flock of sheep was just 5 sheep, and this shepherd is selling 4 from the 5, obviously the owner sees that the 4 went missing, and he's aware of what his shepherd is doing by selling them, so it's not stolen goods. Another pshat of what the Brisa meant to say is, Amar Rav Chisda, that Rav Chisda said, Arba me'eder cotton. If it was a smallest flock of sheep, so then selling 4 is okay because the owner will notice it. V'chamesh me'eder gadol. But if it's a larger flock of sheep, if 4 go missing, the owner may have not noticed, and then only if 5 went missing, then the owner will notice this, and you're allowed to buy it. Another question now the Gemara asks on what it said in the Brisa. There's a contradiction here in what the Brisa says. Why? Ha gufa kashya. Amrit, first the Brisa says, Dalt v'hei tzayin, Dalt v'hei gizin, if it's 4 or 5 sheep or wool, Dalt v'hei in. So that means only if it's 4 or 5, that's something the owner notices and you're allowed to buy it from him. Avol shalish loy, then what that would mean is, but if it's only 3, then the owner doesn't notice and it's not allowed. But aim is seife, what does the Brisa say right after this? Avol loy shtei tzayin. But you're not allowed to buy 2 sheep that the shepherd is selling. So what you see is, but if it's 3, you are allowed. So there's a clear contradiction here regarding 3. Answers the Gemara, like Kashya. There's no contradiction. The 2 parts of the Brisa are speaking about 2 different levels of quality of the sheep that is being sold here. Ha bibriyasa. Here, when it says that 2 you're not allowed, which means that 3 you are allowed, that's because it's good quality sheep, and therefore the owner has his eyes on his sheep, pays much more attention for them, and therefore if just 3 go missing, he notices it. But then and here, when it says that you could only sell if it's 4 or 5, it's because they're weaker and not good quality sheep, and this is something the owner doesn't pay such close attention to, so therefore only if 4 or 5 go missing, he'll realize it, and then you're allowed to sell it or buy it from this shepherd. Then the Brisa said, Rabbi Yehuda says, Baisais, if these are animals that are brought into the house, loichemen, you can buy it because the owner notices. Midbariyes and loichemen. If it's out in the unsettled area, the owner doesn't notice. If the shepherd takes him for himself, and therefore you can't buy. So, the Shaila was asked about what Rabbi Yehuda said here. Rabbi Yehuda areishakoi. There's Rabbi Yehuda's words relate to what it says in the beginning of the Brisa, and therefore it'll come out that Rabbi Yehuda is being stringent, or his words relate to what it said in the Sefer of the Brisa, and he's being lenient. The Gemara spells out what the Shaila here is. Areishakoi is referring to what it said in the Reisha, and then you would be being stringent here. Why? The Omar, what did the Reisha of the Brisa say? Loichin mehen arba v'chamisha tzayin. If a shepherd is selling 4 or 5 sheep, then you're allowed to buy from him. There's no concern of it being stolen goods. And on this, Rabbi Yehuda is coming and he's being stringent and saying, Hani mili, when are you allowed to buy 4 or 5 sheep? Buy size. And yet there's an additional condition. It has to be something that animals that are brought into the house, and that's another reason why the owner noticed this. But if it's from animals that are out in the unsettled area, then I feel Bava Kama. Even if the shepherd is selling 4 or 5, you're not allowed to buy from him, because even though it's such a big amount, 4 or 5, the owner may have not noticed that they went missing because it's out in the field. So Rabbi Yehuda came to be more stringent than what the Brisa said before. Or maybe we could say, what was he arguing? A seifekai. Rabbi Yehuda is coming to be more he's coming to be more lenient regarding what it said in the Sefer. The Amar in the Sefer, it says, you're not allowed to buy from a shepherd 2 sheep or 2 pieces of wool. And on this, Rabbi Yehuda comes to say regarding the animals, when can't you buy if it's only 2? If they're midbariyis, the animals are out in an unsettled area. So if it's only 2, the owner didn't notice. If these are animals that are brought into the house, then even shtaim nami loichin. Even if it's just 2 animals, because it's usually brought into the home and the owner notices that 2 are missing, so even then you can buy it from the shepherd. So he's coming to be more lenient. Tashama, the Gemara brings a proof to this from the language that it says in a different brisa. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda says, loichin baisais mehen, you're allowed to buy the animals that are brought into the home from these shepherds, ve'en loichin midbariyis, but you can't buy the animals that are out in an area unsettled. The owner doesn't notice. Then the Brisa adds, regardless of from where the animal comes from, you can buy, if it's the amount of 4 or 5, then this is something that the owner definitely noticed, so you can buy this. Okay, so you see here clearly in the Braisa, like the pshat that we said, that he's coming to be lenient. Mid'amar b'chol makim. It says here clearly in this Braisa that when it comes to 4 or 5, here Rabbi Yehuda didn't add any additional condition that it also has to be dafka from the ones that are brought into the home. Over here he says if it's 4 or 5, then regardless of if it's in the unsettled area or in the home, 4 or 5 is a number that the owner will always notice, and therefore you could buy from the shepherd. So Shmami no. So therefore, from this we understand when he makes the distinction between those that are brought into the home and those that are not, a seifa koi. It's referring to the case of the seifa where the shepherd is only selling 2 sheep, ulakula. And Rabbi Yehuda is coming to be lenient that even though it's only 2, but if it's brought into the home, the owner notices this. Shmami no. This is a clear ayah to what Rabbi Yehuda was saying. Going back to what it said in the Mishnah, you should not buy from a watchman over fruits. Don't buy fruits from him because he may have taken some fruits for himself and sold it. So the Gemara says, Rav or Rave, Zovin Shebishta Me'arisa. He bought a bundle of pieces of wood from a sharecropper in a field. Amalei Abaye asked Rave, or Rav or Rave, that should be Rave, it's Abaye probably asked Rave, V'hatnan, what didn't we learn in the Mishnah? V'lei Mishem Repetis. From a person that's a watchman over fruits, you can't buy from him eitzim upetis, wood or fruits. So how are you buying from this sharecropper fruits? He's not the owner of the property, and he may have stolen it, and now he's selling it. Amalei. So Rav answered, Hanimili b'shaymer. What it said in our Mishnah is only regarding a watchman. The lesle begufe the ara midi. He has no actual percent of ownership that he gets from the produce of the field itself. He's just a watchman. How's a watchman paid for his work? It's cash, money. So therefore, if he has fruits, there's a concern that he may have snuck away some fruits for himself to make some income, some side income here. However, a sharecropper is the person that is a worker, but he gets a certain percent of the actual produce of the property itself. You don't have to be concerned that he may have stolen these fruits. It's from the share that he gets from the property itself that he's selling here. We learn a watchman over fruits. You are allowed to buy fruits that they're selling. When is this? When they're sitting and selling their fruits, they have big baskets of fruits in front of them, and they have this big scale in front of them that's used to weigh and to sell. Because this is something that they're selling publicly and openly for everybody, and there's no concern that this was stolen. A gazlan doesn't sell in such a kind of open, public fashion. Anytime, like the Mishnah said, anytime someone that's selling you something and he tells you, hatmein, hide what I'm selling you, osa, you're not allowed to buy from them. There's a concern that it was stolen. Like Chemahem, you can buy from the Shemre Peiris, where mi Pesach Hagina, if what they're selling is at the front, in the opening of the garden. They're not trying to hide anything. But if not, if they take you to the back of the garden and they're selling you in a hidden area, so over there's a concern that they're taking you to the back because it was stolen. Itmar, we learned, Tamachlaikis, Gazlan, Me'emas, Mutaliknais. When you know a person that was a Gazlan, that was his profession, and he has a lot of stolen goods, and now you know that this Gazlan is doing tshuva. So at what point are you allowed to buy from him? Rav says, you have to know that this Gazlan got rid of most of his stolen goods, and so therefore most of what he's selling, you can rely on what he's selling, that it comes now from the majority of what he has now in his possession at this point, because he got rid of most of the stolen goods that he has. Shmuel says, as long as you know that there's even a minority of what he has that's definitely his, even if there's other things that there may be a concern that it's still from the stolen goods, you could already buy from him. Even though it's only a miyat, why are we following the miyat of of what he has that you know for sure is his? So the Mefarshim say, because even from the stolen goods that he still does have, we don't know for a fact that it's all mamish stolen goods. There's a concern about it, that it may have been stolen goods because it's things that he has from before when he was still a Gazlan. And now after he did Shuvah, so we see that there's a miyat of things that we know that he bought properly and that he's selling it now. So therefore, since the other things is only a suffix, we can rely on the miyut to buy from him. So the Gemara brings that Oyri late Rav Yehuda la'ada daile. Rav Yehuda taught and told Ada, name of a person, daile, which was an attendant that served him, Kedivrei Oimer, like the opinion that says Afilu miyut shaloi, that as long as a minority of what he has now in his possession, we know that he bought properly and it's his to sell, you can buy from him. Dr. Gemara, another halacha, mamain masar. The possessions that belong to a masar. A masar goes back to what we learned before in the Gemara, an informant. A person that goes to the government or to Goyim that steal and they go show people's properties where their valuables are to go and to steal from people. So this Masr, so as we'll see soon here, the Gemara brings, and Rashi brings it from the Gemara Avodah Zarah, a Masr is an individual that Meiridim v'loy Mailim. You're allowed to throw him into a pit and let him die over there, because this is a person that is causing Goyim to steal from Yidden, and also putting the lives of Yidden in danger. We had before, when you expose a Yid's valuables to a guy, he may steal not only the possessions, but he may also kill. So this Masur is an individual that is Chayiv Misa. So regarding the possessions of this Masur, Rav Huna v'Rav Yehuda, Chad Oma Mutal Abdei. One says even his possessions as well, you're allowed to burn it, destroy it. Biyad, even with your hands. V'Chad Oma, one of them said, no, Asal Abdei biyad. You're not allowed to destroy his possessions with your hands. What's the reason for their machlokes? The one that says you're allowed to destroy his possessions biyad with your hands, because the way we treat his possessions, his money, is not more stringent than his body. As I mentioned, regarding his body, since you're allowed to kill him himself, he's informing on Yidden, so you're allowed to treat his money the same way. The one that says that you're not allowed to destroy his possessions because even if he's a masur, but could be he has good children that will inherit and keep his money. Uksiv, it says Yachin Rasha. A Rasha prepares his money, and the tzaddik yilbash, and then the tzaddik dresses. In other words, the tzaddik, in this case the children of the masur, may be tzaddikim and may inherit from this person, so you're not allowed to destroy his money or his properties. Rav Chisda had a worker, a sharecropper, he would weigh and he would give to Rav Chisda his share, and takel v'shakel, and he would weigh and take for himself his share. So he would weigh, he was very, very meticulous, he was very exact of what he took for himself and what he gave to Rav Chisda. Salke, Rav Chisda got rid of this worker, and caught on Avshay, and he read it on himself, the pasuk that says, "V'tzafon letzaddik cheil chayte," that what's hidden for the tzaddik is the wealth of the sinner. He didn't like the behavior of this sharecropper. And Rashi brings the pshat I just said, that he was very, very particular in what he took for himself and what he gave to Rav Chisda. The Mashal asks on that pshat of Rashi, so why did he get rid of him? What did he do wrong? He was weighing very, very honestly. There's a second pshat that Rashi says that he was taking 50% for himself. And that's why Rav Chisda got rid of him, because usually a sharecropper gets a third, and he was taking half. So therefore, he got rid of him. Okay, so now the Gemara brings regarding a gazlan. Pasuk says, "Kima tikvas chonef." What is the hope of a chonef, of a person that's a gazlan? Ki yivtza, he steals. Ki yishal alaka nafshay. Hashem will throw away his soul. Hashem will take away his life. So when it says that Hashem takes away his life, whose life is it referring to? Rav Huna Rav Chisda argued about this pasuk over here as well. Chadomar, one says nafshe de nigzal. This is referring to the soul of the one that you steal from. When you steal from a person his money, you're also stealing his life, his soul. Chadomar nafshe shel gazlan. The pasuk here is referring to the life of the gazlan, which means Hashem punishes the gazlan, takes away the life of the gazlan for stealing money. And the Gemara brings the proofs that each of the opinions are had to their pshat. The one that says that the pasuk is saying that when you steal money, you're taking the life of the person you steal from, because there's a pasuk that says, this is the way of a person that steals, es nefesh ba'olav yikach. He's not only stealing the money, but he's taking the life of the owner of this money. So we see over here as well, regarding the pasuk, ki yishal l'kan nafshe means the life of the person you stole from. The one that says that nafsha over here refers to the fact that the Eibishter takes away the life of the gazlan. The pasuk says, "Al tigzal dal kidalu." Don't steal from a poor person, even though he's poor and he has very little and there's hardly anything to steal from him. Don't steal. Val tedakoni bashar, and don't oppress the poor person and steal from him by the gates when he's coming to take his leket, shikha, and peya from the fields. Don't steal from him. Ki Hashem yorev rivam, Hashem fights on their behalf. V'keveya es keveya nefesh. And the one that steals from them, Hashem will steal and take away his soul, which means the soul of the gazlan. So here we see that Hashem takes away the life of a gazlan. So the Gemara now explains, V'idach, now the other opinion, why didn't he learn out from the pasuk that we brought before, Nefesh Ba'olav, that is saying that when you steal, you're taking away the life of the nigzal. Nami Haksiv Nefesh Ba'olav Yikach. So the answer is, my Ba'olav the hashta. When it says in that pasuk nefesh ba'olav yikach, it does not refer to the nigzal. It actually refers to the gazlan. That the Eibusher takes away the life of the gazlan. Why is it referred to it in the pasuk as ba'olav? He's not the original owner of the money. He's the one that's possessing the money right now, and therefore the pasuk calls the gazlan ba'olav. V'idach, now the other opinion, Nami,
calls him the owner?
he calls him the owner not because he's possessing the money right now. V'idach, now the other opinion, Nami aksiv v'kovas kaveyem nefesh, that Hashem takes away the soul of the gazlan. So why doesn't he agree to this source that the pasuk nafshay refers to the soul of the gazlan? So he answers over here as well, kovas kaveyem nefesh does not refer to the soul of the gazlan. Ma tam kama. Rather, the pasuk over here is explaining why it is that Hashem will take the life of the gazlan. Ma tam v'kovas kaveyem. Why is it that Hashem will take from those that take from others? Mishum de kavi nefesh. Because when you steal from someone, you take from his soul as well. So here as well, when it says in the pasuk, Ki yishal lakan nafshay, it refers to the fact that you're taking the soul of the nigzal, and therefore Hashem takes the soul of the gazlan as well. Mida keneged mida. Amar Rabbi Yechanan said also similar, Kol ha'geizel as chavere, a person that steals money from his friend, shava pruta, even just the value of a pruta. Ki'ilu neitel nishmasim imenu. It's like you've taken his soul away from him. Shenema, as the pasuk says, Kain orchais kol b'tzei batzais nefesh balav yikach. A person that has a habit of stealing, he's taking the soul of the owner of this money. V'aymer, and then he brought a source of another pasuk. V'achal kitzircha v'lachmecha. He eats from your harvest and from your bread. B'necha b'neisecha. He's taking away from your children as well. He's eating from your. You're eating and you're taking away the life of this person's children. V'aymer, a third pasuk he brought, mechamas b'nei Yehuda, from the extortionists of the place of the children of Yehuda, asher shavchu dam naki ba'artzam. They spill blood in the land. So you see that they're extortionists, and that's called shvichas dam, that they're taking away life. V'aymer, a fourth pasuk he brought, el shol vel beis hadamim, Shaul and the place where there was blood spilled, ala shehemis es hagevainim, that he killed the Gevainim. So Rashi explains that the source of this pasuk is Shaul HaMelech did not kill the Gevainim. Shaul HaMelech killed in the city of Noiv. There was a city of Kayanim. He killed the Kayanim of that city, and these Kayanim would provide sustenance to the Gevainim. So now that he killed the Kayanim, the Gevainim lost their source of sustenance. So he stole the source of sustenance from the Gevainim, and therefore the pasuk is saying that it's as if he killed the Gevainim as well. So the Gemara here explains why, that when Rabbi Yechanan brought the source for this concept, did he bring 4 different psukim? Why all these sources? Because if you'll think and say, nefesh didei, when a person steals, so besides the money that he steals, it's as if he's taking away the life of the person that he stole from. So that's only his life. Avol nefesh banav b'neisav life, but not necessarily does it affect the life of the children. Tashama, therefore he brings another pasuk where it says, B'sar banav b'neisav, that when you steal, you also take away the life of the person's children. And then if you may say, dami, this is only if you're stealing and you're not like a gazlan, you're not paying for what you steal. Dami, but a person that's an extortionist and he steals, but then he pays. So like maybe in such a case, it's not considered like you're taking away the life of the person that you're taking from. Tashama, so here the other pasuk says, Mechamas b'nei Yehuda, uses the term chamas, which refers to a person that steals, but he pays for it. So it's by force. It's by force. In other words, this is what's called an extortionist. He's stealing by force. Yeah, nachanami, but it doesn't matter. But still, if this is something that was valuable to the person, and he may have needed it for his soul, for his life, it's like you're taking away his life. Furthermore, the fourth pasuk he brought was, if you'll think, this is only if you're directly with your hands stealing. If you're indirectly causing a loss of a source of sustenance to a person, so then maybe this doesn't apply, that you're taking his life. Tashama, therefore, he brought another pasuk, El Shaul v'beis Adam el shehemis es hagevainim, that Shaul killed the Gevainim. And what do we see from here? Where do we find that Shaul killed the Gevainim? He didn't kill them. Ella, rather, what happened was, there was a city of Kainim, and Shaul HaMelech killed the Kainim of that city. And these Kainim, so the Gevainim were working for the Kainim, and they would provide for them water and sustenance. Because he took away the source of their sustenance, the pasuk considers as if he killed them. Therefore, we see all these 4 psukim that express this inyan. There's a sikha from the Rebbe in Chelik Lamed Beis in Parshas Kedoshim, where the Rebbe speaks about this inyan barichis. What's the reason for this? That if a person steals money, it's as if you kill the person himself. So the simple pshat is that Rebbe brings from the Rambam, not the Rambam, first the Rebbe brings from the Tosfos that says in another place that the reason is because when you steal money from a person, this may be the last few pennies that he has to buy himself bread, to buy himself food. So you take away that money, he may not have what to eat, and then he could die. And the same with the person's children and so on. And you take away a person's source of sustenance. But then the Rebbe brings, based on what it says in the Rambam doesn't bring the whole arichis. The Rambam just brings the pasuk that was quoted in the beginning, Es nefesh ba'olav yikoch. And the taich of this is, according to the Rambam, when you steal money from a person, you're violating his ownership. When a person has something that he owns, that is something that's personal to him, and you violate a person's privacy or a person's possession, and you take from him, you're taking a piece of his soul. The ownership, the connection a person has to something that's his, that the stealing itself is a violation of his ownership, of his being as a person. And therefore it's considered to be like you took his soul. That's the Rambam's pshat in this. There's more narichas there in the Sikha, Chelik Lamed Beis Parshas Kedoshim. The Mishnah says you're allowed to buy from women, klitzemer, beyehuda, klipishton, certain things that they sell. That is, we know that the husband is aware of this, and therefore they're not stealing it from their husband. Tana Rabbanas and Abraisa, we learn more details about this. Leichim and Anoshim, you're allowed to buy from women, klitzemer, beyehuda, woolen garments that they sell in Yehuda, or klipishton begalol, flax garments in Galil. Avaloi yenes shmana masalpes. You can't buy from them wine, oil, or flour. These are kinds of things that may belong to their husband, and they're selling it without the knowledge of their husband. V'loy men avadim. You're not allowed to buy anything from slaves. They may have taken it from their master. V'loy men atinaikis, and not from children that are making business and selling things, because they may have taken it from their father. Abishal says, Mecheres Isha, a woman is allowed to sell things, Bava Kama dinner, for a small price. She's selling small things just to earn 4 or 5 dinner. And we're not concerned that the husband is upset at her for selling these things and without his knowledge. She sells these things to earn a little income for herself, to be able to make a head covering, l'roisha, for her head. This is a small income that the husband allows, a certain allowance that the husband allows for his wife, and he's not makbid on this. The kulan sha'amru lahatman, anybody that's selling you and tells you to hide what he's selling, asr, you're not allowed to buy from him. Gabai tzedakah, a guy by collecting tzedakah, lekech men davamut, is allowed to collect from a woman some tzedakah. Avaloi davamut, but you're not allowed to collect a big sum of money from a woman because she may give tzedakah without the agreement or the knowledge of her husband. But a small amount of tzedakah that she gives, that's something that the husband is okay with and allows her to give. V'habadodin, people that own an olive press, leichim mehem zeisim b'mida, you're allowed to buy from them if they're selling olives, which is being sold in a midah, which means it's being sold, being measured in a proper midah, and they're selling it openly and publicly in this midah that's being measured, or v'shemen b'midah, or also oil. You're allowed to buy from them oil that they're selling properly and openly in a midah. This is similar to what we said before, when you have the watchman that sells paytis with a big scale, so that's publicly, so there's no concern it was stolen. The same thing also with a woman that's selling this oil openly and publicly in a midah, so we know that the husband is aware of this. But not after selling a few olives or a little bit of oil, not openly and publicly, so then this could be that she took it off from what belonged to her husband, and the husband is not aware of this. It's stolen goods. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, Loikhin, minoshim, you're allowed to buy from women, zeisim, the olives, b'moyed. Moyed simply means in Yom Tiv, but there's another gears here in the Gemara, b'muat, even a little bit. Just before this, the Tana Kama said you're not allowed to take from them just a little, but over here he says you are allowed to buy from them even a little bit of these olives, that there's a concern that they may have taken it from their husband. Begalul elyon. In Galil, over there in that area in Eretz Yisrael, you're allowed. Shapamim, because it's possible sometimes, Adam Baish Limkra Pesach Beisai, a person is embarrassed to sell this little amount at the door of his home. The nice and Mecheres, and he gives it to his wife to sell. And the reason why it's different in Galil, Rashi says, because in Galil, the oil there was very expensive. So even a small amount, if she took it from her husband, the husband is aware of it, and he knows about it, and he's allowing her to sell because he's embarrassed to sell it himself. Says the Gemara, Ravina came to the city of Mechuzah. Also, Nashi de Mechuzah, the women of the place of Mechuzah came. Ramu Kamei, they threw for him for the purpose of tzedakah, for collecting tzedakah, kavli, vishiri, chains and bracelets, jewelry they gave him for tzedakah. Kabul minayu, he accepted that it for tzedakah. Amalei Rabbi Tisfa Ravina. So Rabbi Tisfa asks Ravina based on what we learned before. Vatanya, then we learn in Abraisa. Gabay tzedakah mekabla men dava muat avaloi dava merubah. A gabay tzedakah is allowed to accept from a woman a small amount of money, but not something that's very valuable. It's like they're giving away their jewelry. Maybe it's without their husband's knowledge. How are they allowed to give this? How can you take it from them? Amalei. So Ravina answers, Hani lebnei mechuze dava muat nenu. Over here, for the people of mechuze that were wealthy, this jewelry that these women are giving him is considered to be something very petty, and therefore you could accept it from them. Okay, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we learned the final Mishnah of Masechta Bava Kama. Zok the Heilige Mishnah, Moichen Sha'akovis Moitzi. The strands of wool that come out by a launderer when he washes it, so there's certain strands of wool that come out of this. This launderer can keep it. There's so little that comes out that he doesn't have to, when he gives back the garment to the owner, he doesn't have to give back these strands of wool itself, because we know that the owner doesn't care about this. And even if when a person comes along and says he cares, we don't pay attention to that. People don't care about this, and therefore the launderer can keep these little strands of wool that come out. Vahasaidik, however, a person that's combing a garment, or maybe even this refers to fabric, when you comb the fabric in order to smooth it out, and over here, maitzi, what it brings out, or some are going to say v'shahasaidik maitzi, when you comb it, it brings out strands of wool. There's much more strands of wool that come out here. So this comber is going to have to return it to the balabas. Kaives, a person that's laundering a new garment, Naitel Gimel Chutin. There are three threads that are stitched into the edges of the garment. That was the Seder then. When a person made a new garment, at the end of the garment, he added in sort of three threads at the end of the garment, and then you would remove it. And so after you launder it and then you want to sell it, so you would remove it. So he could remove it, and he can keep it for himself. But Yaisem Yikain, however, if it's more than just three threads that he's removing, more than three he has to give back to the owner. He's makpid on it, he wants it, he expects it to get it back. If these three garments that were sewn into the edges of the garment were black, al gabi alavan, on a white garment, then neitel is hakol. Then removing that, because it's something which takes away from the beauty of the garment, and you're removing it for the benefit of the owner, and this is something that he doesn't want at all, so that you can keep it, it's all yours. Hachayet, a tailor, person gives the materials for a tailor to sew and to make him a garment. Sheshayet is a chut, and he has leftover thread. Kedei litver boy, he has enough thread left over that he can sew with it, and the Gemara will say what that shear is, or umatlis, she gimel al gimel, or he has a piece of this garment that he had to cut off from the garment, and this piece of garment is 3 by 3 tvachim, I think it is. Yeah, is it? Huh? 3 by 3 etzbais, finger breadths. Okay, harel shabalabais. That's big enough of an amount that you have to give it back to the owner of this garment. Another halacha, masha charash moitzi b'matzed. A carpenter that's working with wood, that the owner gave him wood to cut the wood or to smooth out this wood. So this that the carpenter works with a matzed, which is a smaller tool. That's what's the name of it? Adzi, I think it's called. I'm not sure what this is, but it's basically a small axe. When you are cutting out the wood with this, the pieces that fall off are very small. So this is has a thin it's blade. Right. So it's because it's a very, very small blade. So therefore, the pieces of wood that fall off are very, very small, and the owner of the wood is not expecting to get this back. So you can keep these small pieces of wood. But if you're working with the wood, the carpenter is working with the wood with an axe, and now there's bigger pieces of wood that fall from this, shobalabais. Now those bigger pieces of wood you do have to give back to the owner. Now, if the work that you're doing here with this wood is not work that the worker, the carpenter, takes home to himself or in his shop that he does, but he's doing this work in the house of the balabas, even sawdust, even tiny pieces of wood that fall off, also belongs to the balabas. If it's in his house, he's makbid on this, and it belongs to him. Asher says usually the difference between the two cases here is a person that's a schir yaim. He's working a day job, and he's doing the day job for the person in his house. Or, and then the case before is talking about a person that takes a project and he does it in his own shop, and then he delivers it to the balabas. Tan Rabbanan and Abraisa we learned loikhin muchin min hakayvis v'nei shein shaloi. The launderer that has these strands of wool that came out of the garments from the laundry that he did, you're allowed to buy this from this launderer because it's his. It's not stolen goods. He's allowed to keep it. Hakayvis noitel shnei chutim al yainim. A kayvis, a launderer, is allowed to take two of those threads that are at the edge on the top of the garment that you remove, and he can keep it. The Mishnah said three threads he's allowed to keep for himself. The Braisa says only two. The Gemara will explain it soon. Okay, says the Braisa weiter. V'lo yatel boy yoser mishloisha chuvin. Okay, here the next piece of Gemara. It's a little bit hard to explain this without a picture. Do they have a picture over there? Okay, so with a picture, I'll post a picture later. I'll try to explain it to the best of my ability without a picture. What this refers to is when you finished making a garment, or if you have a piece of fabric, so you want to smooth it out. So what they would do is they would stretch it out on sort of a frame of wood. They had two frames of wood on both sides of it, in the length of the garment. And this frame of wood has nails in it, and in the edges of the garment, they would put loops in the edges of the garment, and with these loops, they would hang it tight on these two pieces of wood, and then they could bang it out to smooth it out. That's the chuvin that's referring to over here, these loops. Now, when you make these loops, don't make the loops too tight, more than 3 stitches. And the reason is if you're going to make it too tight, so then when you're going to put it on the nails of this frame that you're putting it on, it's going to stretch out too much. What happens is when it stretches out, if you see in the picture there, when you stretch it out, so then even after you take it off these nails, the garment at the edges is not going to be smooth anymore. You're going to have to cut off from the edges now in order to straighten it out. If you're going to make it too tight, then it's going to end up stretching it out too much, and then you're going to have to cut off too much. So don't make it too tight, not more than 3 stitches. One second, let's continue. When you comb the garment, don't comb it. Every garment has the threads that go in 2 directions. You have the weft and the warp. Okay, which is the shestiai is the garments that go vertically, and the erev is always the threads that go horizontally. So when you're combing it, do not comb the garment to the chassis. You should comb it to the threads that are the erev, which is the one that goes vertically. And the reason for this is because the chassis threads are thinner. If you're going to comb it on those chassis threads, it may tear. But if you comb it on the erev threads, which are thicker, so because the erev thread is that thread when they used to make the garments in those days, there was the chassis thread that was on the machine, and then there's the erev thread that they had the spool of the thread that they threw back and forth, right? That erev thread has to be thicker, that when they throw it back and forth, that it shouldn't tear. So the erev thread, which was thicker, that's what you should comb it in that direction, so it shouldn't tear. And also, when you're going to smooth out the edges, this is going back to the point that we said before, after you finish stretching it out with those loops that you hang it on this frame, and then when you remove it from that frame that is, and now you want to cut it off and you want to smooth it out, so you smooth it out la'arkai, on the length of the garment where you remove it from this frame. But then you don't smooth it out as well also on the width of it, on the other sides of it, because you're cutting off too much. There's no reason to cut off on the width as well. Now, after you remove it from this frame that you put it on, in order to stretch it out, and then when you remove it, so the edges of the garment are not straight, and you have to cut off. So when you're coming to cut it off, at tefach, and you have to cut off even to the amount of a tefach of the edges of the garment, rashoy, you're allowed to cut it off. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to a detail that it said in the Braisa. Omamar, the Tana said in the Braisa, Shnei chutin, that if there are 2 threads that the weaver left at the edges of the garment and you're removing it, that you're allowed to keep for yourself. In fact, the Gemara, but Va'anan Tanan in the Mishnah, it says shalosh, that if there's 3 threads at the edge of the garment, you're allowed to keep for yourself. It says the Gemara like kashi, it's not a question. Haba alimi, if it's thicker garment, if it's thicker threads, then only 2 you can keep for yourself. Va bikatini. If it's thinner threads, then 3 threads that are at the edge of the garment you can keep for yourself. Then the Braisa said, when you're combing the garment, So you shouldn't comb it to the chassis thread, which is the horizontal thread. El ervoy, the Erev thread. That's the direction that you have to comb it, as I mentioned before, because the Erev thread are thicker, and therefore when you comb it in that direction, it won't tear. In a brayso we learned the exact opposite, that you should comb it with the chassis thread, in the direction of the chassis thread. And says the Gemara, like Kashi, it's not a question. Ha beglime. Here it's talking about a garment that you wear every single day. It's a garment that you wear every single day, all the time. So over here, this is something that you should comb it by the chassis thread, which is, you should comb it, that is, by the Erev thread, which is thicker, so then it's not going to tear. Hope I'm getting it right. It's the thicker thread which is not going to tear. Ha besarvela. Then there's the sarvela, which is a different kind of garment. It's not a garment that you wear every day. It's a garment that's an expensive, beautiful piece of clothing, which is it's combed and it's stretched in a different direction. Because over here, even if it's going to thin it out, and there's a concern that it might get torn, but nevertheless, it creates a finer garment. And this is a finer piece of clothing. So this finer piece of clothing is stretched out, or it's combed in the direction that it should make it a finer material, because it's more of that's the kind of garment that it's not made to wear every day. It's made to be a finer material. Okay, the Gemara continues and says, Lo yatel b'yosem mishloisha chubin. So it said that when you stitch these loops at the edge of the garment, don't put in more than 3 stitches. By Rabbi Yirmiyah asked about this. What does it mean? How do we measure these? What is the number of 3 stitches? Amtuye va'asuye chad. When you make a stitch, so you go in and out. Do I say that the stitch that goes in and out, that's considered to be all 1 stitch? Aidoma amtuye va'asuye trei. Or when you go in and out with a stitch, that's already considered to be 2 stitches. Teiku. Didn't resolve this. Then going back to what it said in the Brayso, mashveyu la'arkai. When you cut off the edges, after you take it off from the woods that you stretched it out on, now you take it off, and now the edges are not smooth, and you're smoothing it out. You have to cut off. You cut it off on the length of it. On the width of the garment, over there, you don't smooth it out over there. In a Brayso, we learned the opposite, where it says that you smooth it out on the width of the garment and not on the length of the garment. And says the Gemara, like Kashi, it's not a question. Ha beglime. A garment that a person wears, so the edges of the garment, the length of the garment, that's what you cut off to smooth it out, that it should be straight. Ha behem yaini. But over here, in this brayso that it says that you cut it off in the width, it's talking about a gartel. When a person wears a gartel, the length of the entire gartel is not something that's exposed. That's just around your waist. Then there's the edges of the gartel, which you have the width of the edges of the gartel. Over there, you want it to be straight. So over there is where the brayso said that you cut off in the width of the gartel at its edges. Right, the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, in the Brayso we learned, Ein loichim in asayrik, you can't buy from a comer, moichin, the strands of wool that comes out of his work, because as the Mishnah said, those strands of wool he has to give back to the owner, it's not his. In a place where the minig is that this comer keeps these strands of wool for himself, loichim, so you're allowed to buy it from him, it's not stolen goods. In any place, you can buy from this comer a pillow that's full of these strands of wool, or keses, or a blanket that's full of this strands of wool. What's the reason? Why could you buy it from them? Because he now acquired it for himself. Even if it is stolen, he should have returned it to its owner, but he made a blanket or a pillow out of it, so now it's his. With a shinu, he only has to return the money of it, so you could buy this from him. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Brayso. You help me out with the translation over here. Ein loichin migardi. You're not allowed to buy from a weaver. Loi idin, not idin. Idin is when you have this rod that has the thread on it, which is the Erev thread. Right, as mentioned before, the machine that they used to use in those times to weave. So there was the chassis thread that was on this machine itself. And then there's the Erev thread, which was on a rod. And there's the spool, the thread of the wool. And it's thrown back and forth to make the garment. So now that thread, which is on this rod, the thread would slip off the rod. So what do they do in order that it shouldn't slip off? They would put like a bunch, a piece of wool at the edge of a stopper, a piece of wool to stop it that the thread shouldn't roll off. So this stopper, this wool belongs to the owner that gave the fabric to this worker to make this garment for him. So therefore, the weaver is not allowed to keep this for himself, and therefore you're not allowed to buy it from him. He may have stolen it from the owner. And the loin nidin, and also not the nidin. You're not allowed to buy from this weaver. The nidin are the what's the nidin? The actual the heddles of this machine. That also is not his. The loy punkolin. Punkolin is other types of heddles. Huh? Okay, it's what's used for tapestry. It's not used in the heddles for the same kind of machine. It's the bobbins that's used for the tapestry. Veloy shiyure pikiyos, and also not the leftover thread from the spool. Also, you're not allowed to buy from this weaver because it has to be returned to the owner. You're allowed to buy from a weaver beged menumar, a garment that's speckled and it has different colors of threads in it. The fact that this is a garment that has different colors of threads, what does that show you? That he probably stole it. So he has different threads, leftovers, that he should have returned to the owner, and he made a garment out of it. So this is stolen goods. Or Eirev v'shasi, the Eirev and the Shasi, the garments in both directions, Tavoy v'orig, if it's spun, or arig, or it was a garment that was woven out of this. So in these cases, the reason why you're allowed to buy it from this weaver, even though he stole it, is because, like it said before, he was kind it with a shinui. He made a garment out of it. Amri, so now the question was asked on this. Hashta tavoi shakli. It says here if it was spun, if these threads was spun, you're allowed to buy it from this weaver. Arig mi buy it. If he made a whole garment out of it, it's a much bigger shinui. Needless to say that you can buy it from him. So the Gemara says, no, my arig does not mean a regular garment. Arig means taki or teki. It's something that he made, like these loops, or he made links where he wove it together, but it's not a regular garment. Tana Rabbanon, we learned in the Braise, ein loichim en atzaba, you're not allowed to buy from a dyer, loi oisais, not those pieces of garment that he has that are used as an ice. Which means he uses it as an example when he wants to test to see whether the dye is going to be absorbed in this material. So this is a ice that he uses, and these pieces of material belongs to the owner of the garment. V'loy dugmais, you're not allowed to buy from him also not the examples that he has, because this the owner brings. The owner brings to the dyer an example to show what color he wants. V'loy tlushin shel tzemer, not torn pieces of wool that the owner brought to the dyer. You're allowed to buy from a dyer a garment which was dyed, because again the point here is even if this is stolen, but there's a shinui already over here in what he has. And tovoi, if it's spun wool, so the Gemara asks on this again, begadim, begadim this begadim is part of what it says in the Braise. So ubegadim, and you're allowed to buy from him garments as well. You're allowed to buy from them spun wool and garments that he made out of the wool. If you're allowed to buy from them just a spun wool, which is a shinui, not such a big shinui, begadim, you buy it. If you took the wool and made garments out of it, for sure you're allowed to buy it from him. And says the Gemara, my begadim namti. Begadim over here means felt garments, which is not such a big shinui, and therefore the Braise has to say that you're still allowed to buy it from him. Tana Rabbanan, and another Braise we learned, you give hide to a tanner, or to work it with Hakitsuin, the pieces that are cut off from the edges, vahatlushin, and then the pieces of wool that he tears off of it to smooth it out, harei shabalabais. Those pieces have to be given back to the owner. V'ha'oile u'mishutev b'mayim, but this that comes off of it from when you have to wash it in water, so much less comes off of it from the wool, harei l'shaloi. This the tanner, the worker, can keep it for himself. Okay, let's just see one more piece over here. The Mishnah said that if there was black pieces of thread at the edge of the garment, that you take off and you can keep for yourself. Rav Yehuda said, Katzra Shmei, this person over here that does this job, he's called in Aramaic, this launderer, he's called a Katzra, the Katzra Shokale. And the reason he has this name is because he cuts off from the edges of the garment and he keeps it for himself. That's why he got this name. Rav Yehuda said a halacha related to this regarding tzitzis. Hakoil oilin leminyan tcheles. Everything would be added to the amount that you need for the tcheles of the tzitzis. What this means is, Rashi brings there from the Gemara in Menachos that says, the tzitzis that you put on a garment is not allowed to be placed all the way at the edge of the garment mamish. You have to have at least a measurement of half of the thumb, from the joint to the edge of the thumb. That measurement has to be the distance from the edge of the garment where you place the tzitzis. So what he's saying over here is these extra threads that are there at the edge of the garment that sometimes are removed, you could include the shear of those extra threads for the distance that you need to place the tzitzis in the garment. But the Yitzchak Bri, Rav Yehuda said, however, my son Yitzchak kapar alai. He was particular about this, not to include the measurement of those threads, because those threads are sometimes removed, and therefore he made sure that there's a proper amount there to be able to put the tzitzis on it. Okay, Mitzvah Shem will continue tonight with the Siyam